So I am showing 8 o'clock. Amanda, do we have a quorum, I hope?
We have a quorum. It looks like we're just missing Mr. Eddie from what I can see logged in. But we can go ahead and get started if we'd like to do a quick little roll call. And just as a reminder, we do need to state your full name and where you are participating from this morning. So that's just the city or the county and the state. Mr. Avila? Oh, not seeing him on here, sir. Okay. Mayor Bliss?
Yes, this is Mayor Bliss, and we're participating virtually, and I'm here in the city of Grand Rapids at City Hall.
Great. Ms. Dunn?
Present, and I am in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Great. Mr. Eddie? Mr. McNeely?
Present virtually in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Great. Ms. Shotke?
Good morning. I am present virtually in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Ms. Seeger?
Diana Seeger, I'm here and I'm coming in from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Great. Mr. Talon?
Good morning, Jim Talon, participating from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
And Mr. Nguyen?
Good morning. I'm participating virtually from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Okay. At this time, I'll bring to order the Downtown Development Authority virtual meeting, 8 a.m. on May 12th, 2021. First order of business is the approval of the meeting minutes from April 14. Are there any comments or questions or corrections on the minutes?
Talon moves approval.
Support.
Support from
KM.
KM. Thank you, KM. Any other comments? Is there anyone on the board that would like to vote no or abstain from this motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next, we have the April 30th financial statements. Tricia, are you on the call?
I am. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Your April financial statements are before you. In April, we paid the large debt service payment on the Van Andel Arena bonds. That is our second to last payment. So next fiscal year will be our last one. Yay. If anybody has any questions on the financials, I'm happy to take that now and either answer it or get back to you if I have to do some digging. Your statement D serves as your warrant, and if I could get an approval for that. Thank you.
Are there any questions on the financials?
Talon moves approval of statement D.
Seeger seconds that motion.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Hearing none, is there anyone on the board that would like to vote no or abstain from this motion? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you, Tricia.
Hey, Chair Nguyen, I'm wondering if we're planning a party after we make that last payment.
You darn right.
I think we should. That's quite an accomplishment. Something
we really should. Oh man. When Tricia, when's is the same time next year to pay off?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
It's due May 1st.
Okay. So we can have a similar soiree. Well, think about it.
Plaza.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, next is adoption of the budget. Tim, you want to remind us, this is somewhat administrative in our part, correct?
That's right. So this is the last step in the budget approval process. So last month you recommended your fiscal year 22 budget to the City Commission. Yesterday, the Commission approved that, and so it now comes back to you for formal adoption. From what you saw last month, there have been no changes, and so we are asking for your adoption for the budget beginning July 1, 2021.
Any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt.
This is Seeger. I move approval.
This is Mayor Bliss. I support.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, is there anyone on the board that would like to vote no or abstain from this motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. And next is our dash memorandum of understanding. Tim, you want to take this away too?
Yeah, happy to. So this is a continuation, 1-year extension of our Dash MOU with the Monroe North Tifa as well as the City of Grand Rapids. You may recall from last year we did a 1-year extension in light of the ongoing dynamics of the pandemic. We are continuing with that approach for this coming fiscal year in hopes that we'll have a little bit more clarity for FY23 and beyond, maybe get into more of a multi-year extension. But for this coming year, as proposed, a 1-year extension that would get us through June 30, 2022. There are no other changes proposed in the agreement, so the shares for both the DDA and the TIFA would remain the same. Those were accounted for in the FY22 budget that you just adopted. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any. Otherwise, would seek your approval and authorization to execute the MOU.
Any questions for Tim?
Support the adoption, or move the adoption.
Thanks, Greg. Do we have a second?
I'll second. This is Mayor Bliss.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions or comments?
Question, Tim, this is Jim. Would it be difficult to provide, say, an updated chart like the one on the ridership every month? It's kind of a critical time, and I found that chart really helpful and feels like something that we really need to kind of stay on top of that ridership to see how much it's coming back as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for pointing that out, Member Talon. We have been tracking that as part of our COVID report, which we've been including each month. Okay. Going forward, we'll make sure to point that out so we can track it together. But yeah, I appreciate that. You bring that up.
Sorry, I didn't notice it. It just popped out so well here. Thank you.
Yep. And
Any
thanks
other
to
questions?
Mobile GR and the Rapid who kind of help give us those numbers.
Yeah, they track it.
Yep.
Religiously. All right, hearing none, is there anybody on the board that would like to vote no or abstain from this motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Tim. Next is Ottawa Avenue Reconstruction. Mark Miller, Mark, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So this is just a project I think that we've talked about a few times at a high level to the board. We have worked with the City of Grand Rapids, in particular the engineering department, on this project along with their consultants. And I think we call it a reconstruction. They technically call it a resurfacing project because it doesn't get into a lot of the underground stuff that was typically done in a street when they're technically reconstructed. So in your packet, there is a memo from the city engineering office and a estimate, a fairly unruly spreadsheet that is that represents the estimate. And then the bids came in last week, and the actual bid numbers were, as we might expect, higher than what the estimate was. It was about $500,000 more in the actual construction cost, and that translates to about a $600,000 increase in the total project cost, including all the soft costs and things that go with those. So just as a point of reference on this project, some of the things that the DDA is contributing to are like ped safety things. So there's an updated and more enhanced crosswalk at City Hall that includes the rapid flashing beacon. There are 20 street lights that run from Lyon to Michigan that are upgrades to the typical, or what we would refer to as the enhanced decorative street lights. There are new planters that are irrigated, and those are mostly grouped around the intersections of Lewis Street, Fountain Street, and Lyon Street. And then there is some modification of curb to adjust sidewalks and modify the lane widths, mostly in the sense of making them a little bit narrower, the lanes, and the sidewalks a little bit wider. In particular, where Fountain dead ends into Ottawa, there is a substantial increase in sidewalk space right at that location. And then also north of Lyon and north of Calder Plaza, that really helps to delineate some of the inset parking that would occur adjacent to the plaza area. And then, of course, as is typical with most of our street projects, there's a continuation of the brick edging at the curb and a series of benches, bike loops, and trash cans included with this project. And then I think the other thing that we won't see in the actual, when the project is done, but it is equally important to all of those things, are we're including mast arm foundations and the infrastructure associated with traffic signals at both the Lyon Street and the Pearl Street intersections to really facilitate the future restoration of the two-way street when that comes about. So we're making plans at this point in time to be able to do that so that we don't have to do significant reconstruction work when that does happen. So that's really the extent of the physical improvements. In looking at the spreadsheet and trying to distill it down a little bit in terms of what's going on with that, just briefly, I've tried to group some of the items, and I'll just go through those a little bit. So like the sidewalks, the planter curbs, the brick accents come in at about $49,000 in bid price, and that's actually a drop of about $2,000 from what the estimated price was. A lot of the pedestrian infrastructure that I discussed actually came in at $21,000. That's about a $3,000 change, a decrease in what was estimated. And there's also that mast arm and the electrical and foundations that go along with it. That dropped about $3,000 to an actual price of about $52,000 in total. And then all of the landscaping and furniture that's associated with the project comes in at $148,000. And that's one of the big increases. In total, it increased about $73,000 from the estimated cost. And the majority of that increase was actually the irrigation for those planters. For whatever reason, that shot up quite a bit in the actual price, in the bid price. And then the street lights, the electrical for those street lights, that also went up about $50,000 to a total of about $268,000. The biggest increase within that set of line items was actually the removal of the existing streetlights, which got up about $35,000 more than what was estimated. So what that leads us to is an increase in what is being requested here. So we originally, within that spreadsheet, the construction cost for the DDA's portion of this project was estimated at about $428,000. With these new bid prices and the actual cost, it goes up to $540,000. And that's an increase of about $112,000 from what the estimate was. And then in addition to that, there, as you can see in the spreadsheet, there's a series of others, what we would refer to as soft costs that are in addition to the actual construction cost. That includes a lot of the engineering and design fees that are prorated to be for our portion of the work or the DDA's portion of the work. There's also some city fourth accounts in there. There is a 5% city administration fee that is typical of these projects. And then there's a 12% contingency, which oftentimes is not spent on these projects, but it's important to have in the event that things do come up that we need to either add or change as the project goes on. So the total overall cost went up from $592,000 to $717,963. That's an increase of about $125,000 from the estimate to the actual cost. And so the ask here is from the DDA's contribution to this project is for $717,900. And I'm happy to take questions. I believe that the city engineering, Bree Stam, is in the meeting and can take any additional questions or technical questions that I can't answer.
Mayor, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. So I do have a couple questions. And I recognize the DDA would be supporting some of the enhanced. I think for me, a concern I have is spending this kind of money to do a resurfacing when ultimately I was part of a lot of those conversations during GR Forward, where there was quite a bit of support to change both Ionia and Ottawa to two-way streets to be more walkable. There's lots of data about urban cores and the detriment of these one-way streets. And, and I realized GR Forward was a few years ago, but it's a that we adopted both at the DDA and at the city. And this was clearly one of the priorities. So I guess for me, I'd like to better understand, when are we, I appreciate that there's going to be some work to tee up future changes to make it a two-way street, but when is that going to happen? What is the long-term plan, and is it really the best idea to dump $2.2 million with these construction costs coming in higher than expected when ultimately we want to make that a two-way street?
I'm happy to maybe chime in on that, but I would let Breeze at the city engineer's office maybe begin the commentary back to that. Breeze, are you able to chat?
Yes, certainly. So prior to this whole project teeing off, we actually pushed the project back a year so that we could do engagement. And I believe Josh Nearmore is on the call as well. He led that effort where we engaged the whole downtown community, MDOT, and many different parties. So we did complete that evaluation, and I believe we have some recommendations to do that. So I don't know if Josh is on the call, but he could speak specifically to that engagement, and that's kind of where we're at right now with everything that we're building right now is to put the curbs so that we can have a two-way street from Fulton Street all the way to Michigan. So, and we're also doing the traffic signal work so that anything that we're building doesn't have to be torn up later. And then all we need to do is just implement those last steps, which is to put up the traffic signals and switch it over. So, and that portion of the work is very small. So,
I guess following up on the mayor's question, though, why don't we just bite the bullet and do it all right now? I mean, why wait?
So can I jump in? So this is Josh Nearmore. So we did a charrette with all parties and engaged all of the businesses downtown in December of 2019, just prior to the pandemic. We released a final report. And so what was really interesting in that is it was pretty evenly split between those supporting making it a one-way street and those not. And I think a lot of people could have been swayed. So there are a couple influencing factors about why we delayed it a little bit. So one is we're awaiting the results of Spectrum Health's mobility plan that they're doing for all their campus and district work, as well as all of the stuff that was happening around the medical, the innovation center over there at the corner of Monroe and Michigan. So we were waiting the results of some of that work, also some of the eventual development stuff. Then the other piece too is we do not have the funding in the budget, and there was no budget in this project for the signal work. We have the stuff to do the foundational work, but to actually reconstruct and redo the signals throughout the corridor. But we have been testing the flashing red lights and doing the evaluation of other intersections to potentially decommission signals, which would lower the overall project costs associated with that. So there's the potential to do that. And then the last one is, as the Wedge development project moves forward, And when that eventually is under construction, we will be able to test and evaluate a certain configuration of looking at a two-way to one-way configuration. But right at that time, the general belief was there were too many pieces that we needed to solidify before making that change, but there are things that we can test and configure in the future with the bulk of the work being done right now. So the real reason is we're short a significant amount of resources for all of the signal work that's needed in the corridor to be able to do that. We don't have a funding source for that, and it's not eligible for this grant.
So this is Rick Wynn again. So I guess Josh and Breeze, I mean, knowing that materials and labor and construction right now is at an increased costs, I guess, is it in your determination that Ottawa Street is, sorely needs this repaving at this time? Or would it be better just to wait another year, let's say, get the funding, Josh, that you need in your budget and in our budgets, and then do everything all at once? And hopefully, construction costs will come down after, COVID is passed and the manufacturing and all of these things free up. I mean, does that make sense, or is that not an option?
So in this case, this project is, it's an MDOT project. So the city, it's not a city project, it's an MDOT project. Those funds have been obligated. So that means those funds
use
have
them or
moved forward.
like use them or lose them kind of thing? Is it use them or lose them?
Yes, it's lose them or use them. Yeah, you're going to lose them. You have to use them now. And we would get a significant black eye if we turn down the grant at this point in time. But it is free money that we can use. And it is, I would say that this corridor is at the state where it does need to be resurfaced, not reconstructed, but the road pavement is at that point. And that's why it was on the list, is it is at that point where it's on the curve, on the point of the curve where we need to do that resurfacing effort so that we can keep it up to a certain level without having to spend a lot more later. So it's all part of the effort to spend less over the long term. So yes, it is the perfect time to do the project.
And then my last question is, so Josh, what's your ETA then on assuming, the community embraces the two-way street, then what's your ETA that we could do this?
Pending the outcome of a couple of those other projects I referenced, we could look at it again in the next 2 years, probably.
Chair Wynn, can I follow up with a question for Breeze?
Certainly.
So Breeze, am I reading this right though? So the MDOT grant is $280,000, but the bids came in well over $500,000 more than we expected from initial engineering projections. Is that right?
Well, the actual engineering projections were increased during the final stages. So between the time we turned in, there were some, so we did an addendum which added the additional funding to the project. There was approximately $360,000 more that had to be added, and it was related to a request by MDOT to put in placeholders for snow melt adjustment, which we didn't anticipate that we'll need, but MDOT required that we put it in. And there were some other items as well. But the project was approximately 7.98% over the engineer's estimate. So that's overestimate, but it's not overly, it's not way out of range, but.
So Breeze, the additional requirements that MDOT has added, are they paying the full cost of those, or are those coming out of the Vital Streets Fund and the DDA contribution?
So the DDA would not pay any amount of it. It is additional funds that the city would have to spend. And it's essentially for the ADA ramps, essentially. So Monroe Center is a primary example where we have snow melt. It's underneath the brickwork, and then it's down underneath in the concrete. So the pipes are there, and our anticipation is that we can use the thickness of the brick and the sand subbase to reconfigure the ADA ramps and not have to get into the concrete and the piping. However, MDOT thought that we should have a placeholder in there. So our hope is that we don't have to spend that. But if we do need, if we have to get into it and make some changes, we will need to adjust the snow melt or ask MDOT for a waiver of the ADA ramp at a specific location. So that's another option.
All right. I guess the crux of my question is, if the grant is $280,000, but the estimates came in well over projected, double what the grant is, I'm just struggling. Do we forego similar to what Chair Wynn said, do we push this off until we're able to make it a two-way street and do it all at once instead of coming back in 2 years at a time when potentially the bids would come in lower? So I'm just struggling with this one. I appreciate Josh the feedback from the charrette, but the feedback during GR Forward was pretty overwhelming, and I think we need to make sure that we're implementing the plan that we all adopted that has a bigger vision for all of downtown, and these two streets are really key to that. So I'm just struggling with that. Mm-hmm. This is not consistent with GR Forward plan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, Mayor, that it's really the gateway to downtown, at least from the east. I mean, it's where everybody comes off. Someone else has their hand up.
Yes, this is City Manager Mark Washington.
Okay, sorry.
I'm listening to the conversation. I appreciate the discussion about traffic flow and design, but I would ask perhaps if we could take maybe a bifurcated approach and look at it first from infrastructure to save the street, to make sure it doesn't further deteriorate, because there are some pretty rough spots on Ottawa. And if that's cost that we would have to entail anyway, and if we want to do it in a preventive mode versus an entire reconstructive mode, and what I'm hearing, and I want to make sure if we delayed it a couple of years, we could lose the whole street where we'd have to reconstruct the entire street versus just primarily doing the overlay. Is that correct, Mr. Nearmore?
That's correct, Brees. Yes.
Okay. So, but if we do the infrastructure work, that doesn't prohibit us from coming back and doing the traffic redesign work later, correct?
No, sir, it does not. It's actually going to be a much less costly endeavor to make the conversion. The biggest investment cost that the city will need to make is in the signal infrastructure in the corridor to make sure it works, which will be a substantial investment of which we do not have in the current fiscal planning. So we will have to work to get that. I believe the last time we talked, it was almost $1 million in signal work that was needed in the corridor in the surrounding area.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Question from Talon. I wonder if it's possible to get a copy of the report on the charrette. I don't remember seeing that, and I am curious about what the feedback was from stakeholders.
We can definitely share that as a follow-up. That was a request from a few people from a few months ago.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Greg, a question relevant to the conversation you and the mayor initiated, but not necessarily on this proposal, which is, have we, from industry experts, do we have maybe an analyst or prediction or forecast on what will happen to the inflationary impact on these projects over the next 24 months? Clearly, labor and supply chain scarcity are causing inflation, but is that expected to hold? And if so, it may suggest that the DDA ought to relook at even the budget that it just passed, with that in mind, that we'll have some contingency costs that we're going to be incurring for anything that we're trying to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, Lion Square comes to mind, but I think I think there's also no magic wand that says construction costs and materials are going to go down in the future either. So I don't think anyone has that crystal ball, but so any other questions? Is there anyone willing to put forth a motion?
Maybe just real quick, so we're all kind of on the same page here. So Mark, would you mind just giving everyone a reminder of what the DDA's share of this project is and what the requested investment is for? I do appreciate all of the discussion on this. It's something that we've struggled with, but maybe if we just get a recap of that so we're all clear on what the DDA's share and role would be in this project.
Yeah, so the overall project cost, and that's what we're asking for, is $717,900. In the memo, prior to knowing what the final cost would be, because the bids hadn't come in, we had talked about the 2 fiscal years and straddling this between 2 fiscal years. So fiscal year 22 has allocated $200,000 to the project. We would pick up the remaining $517,000 in fiscal year 23 to contribute to the project. And that is sort of the numbers that we're dealing with and how we might allocate them within our budget. And Tim, are you also asking for maybe a recap of what we're actually investing in?
Yeah. Sorry if that wasn't clear.
Okay. Yeah. So as I said earlier, we're some of the big items include the decorative street lights that would run from Lyon to Michigan. Those decorative street lights already run south from Lyon to Fulton, so we aren't really replacing those. We're just continuing the pattern of the decorative lights, and there's about 20 of them that run in that stretch. There's also new planters and landscaping and some trees within those planters. As I mentioned earlier, there's a continuation of the brick edging that goes along the sidewalk edge at the curb. There's benches, there's bike loops, there's trash cans. And then there's also, as we've talked about a little bit, the actual foundations and infrastructure for the 2 mast arm locations that we believe will be needed as we restore the 2-way operation in the future. And those are both at Lyon and Pearl. And then there's also an enhanced pedestrian crosswalk at City Hall with a rapid flashing beacon across Ottawa.
And maybe this is probably a follow-up question for Brees. You mentioned that none of that work or investment would need to get altered when the 2-lane occurs. Can you confirm that?
Yes, I can confirm that. So that the design of the road allows for a 2-way conversion. It's been completely evaluated by our traffic safety department, thoroughly reviewed, and it's also been reviewed by MDOT as well, because it does affect how the freeway would work. So they understand how that would operate. So yeah, it's really quite an enhancement. There's bulb outs that are also being placed to help with the traffic calming. All of that is really going to transform the street. So every time we touch a street, we really want to, bring forward the ideas of GR Forward and also the Vital Streets Plan. And I think we're really doing that here. I guess with a resurfacing project, I would call it resurfacing plus because we are doing some curb work. But there are planters, irrigation, there'll be flowers and shrubs at some of the corners, Lion, Monroe Center. I think there's another one at Fountain Street, and then yeah, it's going to transform the street, I think, make it look a lot better.
Okay, well, I mean, as I see it, if we can summarize the pros. One, of course, it's the grant from MDOT, from the state. Two, all of the work that's being completed will set us up for two-way in the future. And three, the street it sounds like the street is going to be, significantly enhanced with landscape, etc. So that's very positive. I think the con, of course, it's over estimate. And secondly, it doesn't get us the two-way right away. But I would caution us, even though I brought it up, there's no guarantee that inflation won't continue in this arena. And for all we know, if we waited another year, the bids might be even higher. So that's a risk we may be taking. I think that the pros outweigh the cons in this case. I think I would just, if we approve this, I would encourage Josh that if we wait for projects to occur, we may not make any decisions on any street. So I would caution us not to make the two-way a contingency or waiting on construction or other projects that might occur along that street.
Chair Wynn, this is Jim. I appreciate your summary there, and it does seem to me that it moves us a long way in the direction of the two-way, and I also share your concern that we may not be seeing costs go down for quite a while. So it does feel like this moves us a long way in the direction of a two-way street, and for me, that's a good thing.
Is that a motion, Member Talent?
I'll move approval of this motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
This is Seeger. I'm second the motion.
Thank you, Member Seeger. Do we have a motion and a second? Any other comments or questions regarding this?
Chair Wynn, I would just ask, I appreciate that as well. I'm still struggling with this, but what I would request is that the DDA put this on their list and that we revisit it within the next 24 months. My concern is we're going to move forward with this resurfacing and it'll go to the bottom of the list. And I want to make sure that we pick it back up and move forward and ultimately have a two-way street. So.
Would you like that added to the motion?
Yeah, or maybe just Tim can add it on his to-do list and make sure that it doesn't fall off our radar.
It's on the board.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for your comments, Mayor.
And Chair, this is Jim. Recognizing that a significant piece of that is going to be to find that, I think Josh said over $1 million or probably more for the changing of all the street signals. That's significant cost that we don't have identified funding source for right now. So
Correct.
It'll be contingent on that for sure.
Correct. All right, any other comments? Appreciate them all. Hearing none, is there anyone on the board that would like to vote no or abstain from this motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Breeze and Josh.
Thank you very much.
Everybody.
We'll keep you updated.
Which, this is a sidebar, Tim, but what's the ETA for Ionia becoming two-way?
That was a part of that. I believe those were looked at in tandem during that charrette to understand the impacts of two-way in Ottawa, how that would play out on Ionia. But I don't know the timing offhand, so I don't know if anyone from the city is still on or if they hopped off. But
they got their motion, so they split.
No, sir, I'm still here. I'm still here.
Just kidding.
But just to clarify, is we're looking at them in tandem because there's some operational things that we would need to do, like with respect to deliveries. What are businesses going to do with deliveries that have been relying on that? So that's what we looked at throughout the planning project. But the Ionia Street is in much better pavement condition than Ottawa is. So we would have to look at what that relates to, but we're doing with the signal evaluation that includes the changes to both of those streets in order to be able to support operations. When I gave that almost $1 million figure, that's not just for Ottawa Street, that's for all of the surrounding infrastructure. But there's also some bicycle improvements that are looked at on Ionia Street to be able to make that the major connection. So Ionia may in fact actually remain as a one-way street to help augment or support Ottawa. They may not have to be decoupled because there may be some delivery and some other things that we look at associated with that. But the study did evaluate that. But Ottawa is the one that was the biggest source of focus, is like the major retail street.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry for my offhanded comment, Josh. Next is Bridge South update. Tim, you want to key it up?
Yeah, I'll key this up real quick for our guests, so Mr. Lott and Mr. Page. And I believe Mr. Lott is pulling up his screen right now, but you'll recall a few months ago, back in December, I believe, we had an update on the Bridge South process, and just want to bring back our team to talk through what work they've been doing, some of the considerations that the DDA will need to wrestle with in the future as we think about a disposition plan for the west side dash lots. And so just want to have our team come back and talk through that, and then we have a little bit of time for discussion as well. So look forward to hearing your thoughts and reaction to what is presented. With that, Mr. Lott and Mr. Page, we'll kick it over to you.
Good morning. Can everybody see the PDF I'm sharing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. It's good to speak with you all again. And we're going to run through this quickly in the interest of time. So I would like to note that if anybody would like to spend some more time on this with us, we'd be happy to schedule a follow-up meeting or a follow-up discussion as need be. So we'll proceed, and please let us know if you have any questions as we roll through. You've seen much of this the last time we spoke with you. We're proceeding, we're going to spend most of our time talking about considerations and next steps that you're going to want to take in view of disposition of this land. But here are the key areas shown in pink, including the YMCA lot behind the YMCA or north of the YMCA. And just some existing zoning conditions, which we've been through before, kind of an analysis of the existing parking. We have almost 1,400 spaces that we're dealing with here on these various lots. And then we have an opportunity to gain additional street spaces as part of this work as well. We think that's important opportunity we take advantage of here. And then as far as these development scenarios go, again, this is similar to what you've seen in the past. What Tim and Mark have asked us to do is to provide kind of a range of development densities here. So moving forward, DGRI can evaluate development proposals and make decisions based in kind of this frame that we're providing for you. So our overall strategy, read through this quickly, 3 separate development sites at 3 different scales relating to context, better utilize street parking that we spoke of just a moment ago. We're going to propose centralized parking areas to increase supply while minimizing impact on the land. Everything we've heard in all of our discussions from stakeholders to residents has been obviously focused around housing. We all know there's a need, and this is one of the few large sites in downtown that we have an opportunity to impact our housing needs. Additionally, providing workspaces to support the entrepreneurial community in West Michigan. This is an aspirational goal that DGRI has had for a while, and we think that we have an opportunity here to help support that. Provide additional green space that can serve both the YMCA and the community. Provide better pedestrian connections to the neighborhood from the West Side neighborhood to the new development neighborhood. And then improved access through the area through new connections and streets. So our study area again, as you know them, the existing conditions, if you need some reminders of what we're talking about here. And then we have our various development scenarios here. Looking at them in 3 places, the consistency, of course, is these centralized parking solutions in which public investment would be used to provide these central parking solutions to aid the development. But this is our low end of density, where we're suggesting approximately 550 units as a total development. Everything you see here on the screen is about 550 units. We're suggesting parking in this diagrammatically and cleanly for discussion for 400 additional spaces moving forward that the city would own and operate. We're suggesting that happening on the Bridge Street site on the gray P that you see here over on the left of the screen. That project also would include the relocated fire station in the deck. That is something that the fire department is excited about and would create a singular city project there in that parking deck. And then as we move forward in the schemes, you see step up in densities along Seward Street to 4-story apartment buildings and higher towers along the freeway at 925 units. And then at our densest suggestion, we're north of 20 stories along the freeway and a total residential unit of over 1,000 units with the parking to support both the units and the additional 400 spaces moving forward the city deck. It should also be said that we've been working with the YMCA on their parking needs and parking solutions as well. You'll see interspersed spaces here adjacent to the front door of the Y that are devoted to the Y, thinking that they're comfortable with a dispersed parking solution both in the street and some concentrated in front of their front door. So you see here also in a couple more details the additional green space that we've introduced outside the front door of the YMCA, which would be used both for their programming and for the community. And then a pedestrian green connector that would get you from the neighborhood to the west to the front door of the YMCA and into the neighborhood. So into considerations, which is really what we've been spending our time working on over the past couple of months, is how does this align, how does this scheme align with the housing needs assessment, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but just the high level numbers. You know, we have additional needs of over 5,000 rental units and over 3,000 sale units. And we have needs at all income levels.
Could we, sorry, Ted, can we make sure everyone's on mute if you're not speaking? Thank you.
Thank you,
Proceed.
Tim. And we have needs at all income levels for housing, which I think is an important consideration in this. So where does the housing needs assessment and what we're talking about overlap, and where do we have that opportunity for strategic overlap? In support of more LIHTC development, obviously leveraging publicly owned properties, support new housing, which is kind of the essence of what we're talking about here. Recalibrating economic development incentives to support more affordability. I think that can be in multiple places from both the DDA and DGRI side. Targeting 20 to 30% of the total unit count at or below 80% AMI. And then understanding that given this property's proximity to downtown and the tools that DGRI has available to it, that we remind ourselves that market rate housing is an important part of meeting the overall community housing needs as part of this. There's no way that we can put a level of density of housing right next to Grand Valley State University or any university without considering the idea that it would either be populated by students intentionally or otherwise. So it's something that we need to consider in this process. Student housing in this situation could have unintended consequences. Students can qualify as low income, which could potentially affect existing housing policies. Rents can both be higher with the low-income students, making the affordability of the community look worse. And then depending on the design of the student apartments, if we were to go that way, they're not necessarily translatable to a broader residential market. So if depending on disposal strategies, DGRI may want to retain some design control over floor plans and buildings moving forward. Having said that, student housing can have a benefit to this community and this location. Given the size of Grand Valley, you could have a substantial scale project with residences and avoid subsidization needs. The complex could be a key source of revenue as a garage tenant, a structured parking tenant. It will take student housing pressure off of other parts of the city, most specifically the west side, and it would create a dense customer base for retail-oriented uses in the neighborhoods, both on Bridge and in Fulton. So just some things to consider moving forward. There's certainly a reasonable argument for including some targeted student development as part of this overall project. As part of this effort, both Tim and Mark, as we've been moving through this, have said to us multiple times, we don't need another plan book. We need tools and strategies to implement housing on these sites. So what we've developed as part of this team are a couple of tools, a couple of spreadsheets to help DGRI and the city measure the impact of the affordable housing and the non-affordable housing, I suppose, as well, or the market rate housing as well. The first one is essentially will help DGRI independently identify the revenue gap in an affordable housing scenario to help it understand what needs to be funded as part of a gap and what opportunities are there to fund as part of a gap. The second one, it will help the DGRI and the city understand what the income tax implications are of either fully market rate conditions or a portion of subsidized conditions where folks would theoretically have less income to tax. It'll help the city and DGRI understand what the tax benefits or costs will be to that affordable housing. We spoke about the commercial manufacturing space as part of the scheme. The intent is to provide business leases that are currently lacking in downtown. DGRI would control these spaces, manage the rents, and curate target businesses and constituencies in these spaces. The spaces are intended to be flexible so that they can be configured for a variety of tenants, needs, and uses. We're thinking industrial type finishes that are cheap and fast to construct while being easy to modify or remove in the future, and I think that's key. because we may decide in a not too distant future that there was a higher and better use for some of these spaces, like more housing, for example. And we may want to be able to remove these pieces and put new uses in those places. The intent is that these features have accessible overhead doors and other features for light manufacturing while maintaining active street fronts for the users. So these are just some antecedent examples of some of the spaces that we've been thinking about, and these are simple industrial barn type structures that you see everywhere, but this is the kind of thing that we're thinking could be part of that overall development. And it could get more complicated if decided to make these more directly what we know is live workspaces, combine the housing into these light manufacturing units as well. So then from Sam Schwartz, our transportation consultant, just some considerations as well. The adding of the on-street parking will serve local destinations, slow traffic, and create consistency. We may need to modify curbs in these situations. I think that's been brought up by many parties in this, and I think the scale of the project can accommodate that. We'll need to look at dash routes and probably other transit routes as it relates to the road configurations and higher densities. Something that's been brought up multiple places as well is the phasing of surface parking redevelopment will be critical for the project's success. Essentially, we don't want to take all this parking off line at one point. We want to do it in steps to make sure that we're not adversely affecting the existing parking conditions. Access into the site is difficult, so it'll be important to consider neighborhood traffic patterns and access as the overall site is developed. And then we're including a pedestrian rail crossing, so we will need to work with the rail operator to make sure that works. So these are just some statements about the three various sites. Seward would be self-parked, and it should be understood that even at that higher density, it's a low overall traffic generator. And then in all these conditions, we want to maintain our bike infrastructure or enhance it if possible. The fire station, obviously they have their accessibility and truck maneuvering concerns, which will be part of any design. But it should be noted that both from Mobile GR and Sam Schwartz, that is really the place to locate concentrated parking on Area 8. And it's something that the Bridge Street businesses have been concerned about as well, providing that adjacent parking to the business district. And then Dash 7 and YMCA, obviously with modifications to the street grid, we need to spend some time looking at that. But again, concentrated parking located on Mount Vernon is really the place where we want to put a parking deck against the freeway and up against Mount Vernon. So that is the sprint through the work that we've been doing. We're happy to take questions. And again, if somebody wants to spend some more time, I'd be more than happy to spend some more time in a separate setting. So please let me know what you think. And Mr. Page, do you have anything to add?
No, thank you. That's a great summary.
All right. Any questions for Ted regarding the presentation?
Mr. Chairman, it's Greg. I have a question, and great work. I loved how this project is developing. I had a question about the mechanism. I thought I heard you say that some of those spaces, and I'm not sure the scope of them, but some of them, the rents or uses would be controlled by DGRI.
Yeah, this is we glossed over this, Greg, but the intent is that these blue commercial spaces would be DGRI owned and curated commercial spaces that would address both diversity in business type issues in downtown and diversity in business ownership issues. But so, for example, DGRI is subsidizing rents for tenants in downtown right now. And so it's a way to potentially more directly address the concerns that DGRI has for both business function and business ownership in downtown. But it's only those blue boxes. I think everything else here is open for discussion about how it's owned, how it's operated. And I think those are negotiating points for DGRI as it gets closer to sale agreements with developers. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Yep.
And Mr. Chair, I would just say as the project develops, it'd be, I think, important for the board to discuss from a strategic standpoint as well as a principled standpoint, sort of the mix of competing with those who are funding us, and kind of where we draw those lines. Into commercial entities fund the DDA, and this would potentially, continue to put the DDA in more direct competition with some of our funders. So it's just sort of an open philosophical question.
Member Eddie, do you have a comment?
Yes, I was thinking about that question as well in terms of the properties that are listed in blue that the DDA would kind of give leadership to. And my question is, I would be curious and interested if we might be able to, and maybe it's not a we thing, but if there might be a way to work with the development, the Economic Development Office and others to think through how we may be able to begin to provide some sort of, I guess, ownership, if you will, ownership options to developers and entrepreneurs of color as well. And if it's not this project, maybe it's another project, but I would love for us to kind of keep that in mind to say, how do we create access, and what type of on-ramp might be able to happen with entrepreneurs of color and current and potential developers of color as well.
All right, thank you. Mayor Bliss, do you have a comment as well? You're on mute still.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. I appreciate Greg's question. I'm going back to the presentation we just had last week, though, on the retail study, recognizing that a significant part of the issue is the rent for commercial spaces, especially when you have restaurants and bars in the same area that drive up the cost of the square footage for those spaces. And so I do think having a deeper conversation about this and the benefit of that versus continuing to subsidize rents, because I know, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't there a limitation where we can only provide that type of support for 18 months? Unlike this potentially could be a space where we'd have the opportunity to support small businesses, even incubator space for small businesses to grow longer than 18 months. Am I threading these different issues together correctly, or am I off a little bit?
No, I think you're right on. And there is a statutory limitation on the amount of support we can provide through the retail incubator grant. And it's 18 months. So yeah, in this model, this concept, DGRI, DDA could be the owner and then find ways to help support rent and or entry for entrepreneurs in a different way than the grant that we currently have, is the thinking.
Okay. Member Talon, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I want to add my kudos to Ted on the presentation and the team. And wondering if we could go back to the slide that talked about so-called affordable housing. I seem to remember a percentage. Oh yeah, target 20 to 30%. And I guess I just want to think about whether we can up those numbers. I think it's a huge need. I feel like everything I've learned and understand about the housing situation is that we're more likely to get market rate housing built by the private sector than we are affordable housing. So I feel like our role needs to be to figure out how to get those numbers up. And I recognize the advantages of perhaps one subsidizing the other, and I appreciate the look at that. But really want to encourage us to get those numbers up higher if we can. For the 20-30% below 80% AMI is the number that I was looking at.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Member Eddie, do you have another comment, or your hand is still up? And you're on mute. No. Any other comments at all? It was a great presentation. It's an interesting look at what we potentially can do. And Mayor, I agree with you with having sat through the retail presentation. We really do need to, you know, kind of talk about how we can react to that in a smarter, more intelligent, I guess, but more intentional way for our retail prospects downtown and, you know, and on the west side. So any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Mr. Lott. Nice presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. It's good to see you.
You too.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott. Next is the City of Grand Rapids Equitable Economic Development Plan. Tim, do you want to key this up as well?
Yeah, I'll do a quick introduction here. So a few members have reached out, and as we've seen the city's work kind of progress in the from the equitable economic development and mobility strategic plan, wanted to invite Mr. Jeremiah Gracia here to give an update. I think most of you have probably met Mr. Gracia, but he's the new economic development director, has been with the city 11 months. So I don't think he's been here formally, but wanted to bring him here to introduce him, but also to give an important update on the city's work and specifically on the inclusion plan. And so, Mr. Gracia, if you are still with us, would gladly turn it over to you. And we do have, Jeremiah, we have your slides queued up, and Amanda can help advance them for you.
I see it. Well, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Jeremiah Gracia, Director of Economic Development. And Tim, I've been here 11 months and 3 weeks. So in 1 week, I'll be here a full year.
Who's counting?
It's gone fast. But I also want to make a couple things. And the reason that this position in the city was very enticing to me was because we had this equitable economic development and mobility strategic plan. And so I've been able to come in and join a really strong team in making sure that we set policy and programs and understand what companies' needs are, and understand many stakeholders from community to neighborhood to business, and balancing the needs of the community as well as the strategic plan. But very focused today, I've been asked to give this update on this inclusion plan. And if you're not familiar with the inclusion plan, it is a policy that we've created, started in January 2020. So every project that comes through our office seeking any economic development incentives is required to complete an inclusion plan. So I want to give some context as it relates to the overall strategy. So if we can move to the next slide, Amanda. So again, the Equitable Economic Development and Mobility Strategic Plan has 3 major goals and strategic directions, right? And so we've talked, ironically, about all of these today. About talking about expanding opportunity and economic competitiveness. We talked about mobility items related to projects and the dash and everything else in between. And obviously talking about inclusive growth and access to city services. So very fitting conversation to have today based on your agenda, but I wanted to give some context of these are the key areas of sort of the goals. And then the next slide. These are the 6 primary focus areas, how we and Mobile GR and Parking Services are partnering on this plan. So the first 3 you'll see on the left of the screen, the business development, real estate development, and neighborhood business districts, that is primarily within the realm of the Economic Development Office. And then those on the right are primarily driven and led by the Mobile GR office and Mr. Naramore. Now, it must be said these aren't done in silos. We understand the correlation and conversations when we do a development project and how we balance those things that are necessary for transportation and parking, and as well as the economic development side of the equation. But again, this is important context for us to think about how we are aligning ourselves, resourcing ourselves, and engaging the community on these focus areas. Next slide. So what's next? So the equitable real estate development piece is about balancing and taking consideration, again, all of those pieces that I've mentioned previously, and making sure that we look at community engagement, land use, housing, which are, again, another discussion today about affordable housing and market rate, to economic opportunities and when those projects are taking place and who they're hiring and how they're investing and how they're using minority contractors and the like, and then how we're moving people to places to work, shop, and otherwise. So I want to talk about how the inclusion plan, next slide, a little more specific about it and its integration of the into the equitable economic development plan. So again, I mentioned earlier, this was implemented in January 1st. And again, this is a direct result of our plan and the city's strategic plan to increase the utilization of MBEs, WBEs, and MLBE contractors in private development projects. So how I also want to say that this was a project that we really took probably a year or so of engaging with our customers, which would be the contract managers and construction managers, making sure that they'd say, hey, do you understand this policy we're creating? And we want you to be a part of that policy for two main reasons. One, it increases their buy-in and understanding what we're trying to do. And two, validates that we of those folks that are willing to buy in. And frankly, they were ready to go before the January 21st implementations. And therefore, we knew those projects were coming online, and we knew they would be committed to completing the inclusion plan and helping us bring success and outcomes to the project itself. Again, all of that is working in collaboration with our Economic Development Office. This is not try to be a punitive by any means. This is about collaboration and making sure that we open up the private development and those general contractors through a 4-step process through the city, which I'll cover now. Next slide. This is it's also important that this is the 4-step process of the inclusion plan. So phase 1, right? So when the project is contacts our office, we're talking about the plan and making sure we understand, especially if it's the company, where we say, hey, we need to be connected to your contractor if that's been selected, and making sure that they understand that you're going to have to complete this inclusion plan. And we're going to review it and approve the inclusion plan submission as part of your request for an incentive, right? So the outcome of that is making sure that we do collect that inclusion plan and evaluate the efforts in programming for inclusive contracting. So there's a lot of conversation back and forth, making sure they understand all of the application process and what it means for them, what they need to be getting, and how they need to do that. And as well as in this phase, we're also working with our Office of Equity and Engagement through their efforts to also provide them a list of those contractors that have registered with the city already, again, to help remove barriers and maybe even make new connections for them to complete their inclusion plan application and identify those folks who they're going to be submitting bids for, which leads me to the second part. So phase 2, the post-bid and pre-construction, the applicant has to submit a list of those MBE, WB, and MLB contractors that have been secured and attended to the amount of the contract. So again, at that point, we review that list and the values, and noting any variation from those aspirational goals submitted with that initial plan in phase 1. Again, the outcome is just to validate the implementation of the inclusion plan strategies in their bidding process to hit those aspirational goals that they have set forth. Then we move in the construction side. So once the construction begins, our office is working closely with them on a monthly basis to make sure that they're reporting back and making sure that contract utilization is consistent with their bids, that the they have committed to in their inclusion plan. And then the last phase is this post-construction phase of submitting our final report, reviewing and recording the outcomes of the projects and as it relates to the success and outcomes of our inclusion plan. Next slide. So this is a particular, again, all of those things I mentioned earlier from our strategic focus areas and how we're implementing, neighborhood real estate and business development. Boston Square is one of those projects that has yet to go to bid and really start in this plan, but one of those projects that understands where we're going with the inclusion plan, and we'll be using it in this project as well as many other equitable economic development principles. And in fact, we have a special voluntary equitable economic development and community partnership agreement with this project that is focused on those equitable outcomes of business ownership and home ownership, as well as minority contractor involvement in the construction process. Next slide. Another project that we have, and you will see on the next slide, that has committed fully to, pretty significantly, to the inclusion plan is the 1601 Madison Avenue project that will be the corporate headquarters of MCPC. And many of you might see this as an important project that is happening in the 3rd Ward and will result in about 100 new jobs to that area, and more importantly, clean up a brownfield site that has been sitting vacant for a number of years. And we partnered not only with the developer, more importantly with the area, and the Southtown Corridor Improvement Authority has also provided some development support directly to this project as well. Next slide. So what's the outcome? What has happened since we've implemented this since January 1st? And I think the numbers here speak for themselves in terms of the aspirational commitments that each of these projects have committed to date for their construction projects. Now, again, I want to be clear, all of these projects have not been fully bid or commenced construction. So this is the results of their phase 1 of their inclusion plan application after having significant conversations working with our office to understand what that means and how they set that up. So just to give some context, so 1809 Century is the Blackmer facility, and that will basically demolish a facility that's about 44,000 square feet and result in a 55,000 square foot new manufacturing facility, and they've committed 750,000. 102 Hall is a project by Isaac Norris in the 3rd Ward, and is a neighborhood project that will be basically creating 4 roughly 1,200 square foot retail/office spaces, and he's committed 100% of his project would be MBE, WB, or MLBE. The 1601 Madison project, which I mentioned earlier, again was that project that's going to be corporate headquarters to MCPC, and again, this project has committed almost $3 million of the overall project to the inclusion plan. And then last but not least is 900 Leonard, which is a true 100% housing project, about 119 units that we just had a public hearing on last night. They have committed $1.8 million for that housing project on the west side. So again, I want to point out a couple things here. This is phase 1. Remember, we just launched this in January, and so now we're moving into phase 2. Once they go to the bid, and making sure that we help them understand or see where they are in those targets and work through that, and then have reportable outcomes as it relates to the final numbers after construction is complete. I also want to note that the 1601 Madison project has additional goal, which is not included here, of a 10% utilization of 49507 based subcontractors for their project. So they chose to do that and said that's a focus area we have, and so it wouldn't be included in the inclusion plan, but we're going above and beyond in terms of making sure that we utilize local folks for our construction project. Next slide. So that concludes my summary of the inclusion plan to date. Happy to answer any questions, and certainly you have my information on the screen there, so you can contact me directly. about anything related to a project you're working on as it relates to an inclusion plan, and or really any economic development and business services that you may need to help your company not only utilize the inclusion plan, but any of the incentives that are or programs that our office administers, as well as helping you through the permitting and construction process. So, Mr. Kelly, I'll turn it over to you to facilitate questions, or I think some people put their hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremiah. Chair Wynn, do you want to facilitate? Looks like maybe Member McNeely has his hand up.
Yes, Member McNeely.
Thanks, Chairman, and thanks, Jeremiah, for that presentation. I was wondering if, just to sort of on a base level, if you could define for me the city's definition of equity and the adjective form equitable, as both are used pretty repletely through the strategic plan. Jeremiah, looks like you're on mute.
Sorry, you there?
Yeah, we got you.
So I'm going to read it from the city's strategic plan, which was the guidepost for us as it relates to the equity that we use throughout all other of our plans in Grand Rapids. So I'm going to pull that up right here just to make sure, Mr. McGill, that I'm completely accurate with you as it's stated in our strategic plan. So if you give me 1 second here, I'm going to read it for you right off the city's strategic plan as well, to be accurate here. So this is, we define it as leveraging city influence to intentionally remove and prevent barriers created by systemic and institutional injustice. So this inclusion plan is directly helping to remove those barriers of minority MBE, WB, or MLB contractors participating in private development projects.
Thank you.
Mr. Eddy.
Great question.
Jeremiah, thank you for that presentation and for the work that your office is doing in leading our city in these efforts. And I have been one of those advocates for having you come and present some of this stuff to us from the DDA, because for a while now, since I've been on, we've had this conversation of, how do we diversify, like value diversity, and diversify the projects that we see come before us and presented before us as a committee. And I oftentimes find myself speaking in that place of diversity when it comes to these projects. And I sometimes assume, hey, when folks see my hand, it may be like, oh, here goes that guy that's going to be speaking on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But if I don't, who will? And we've had these conversations because some of the projects that come before us, some of them do lack that diversity. And a lot of times it's easiest to choose to work with the people that you have always worked with, or that you feel is easiest, or sometimes that it could be so-and-so's brothers, cousins, whatever. And I believe the work that you all are doing at the city level obviously has a direct impact and influence on the work that we're doing. And so there's no reason that we can't do these things together and create some of these structural policies, if you will, together, so that it ultimately does bring more vibrancy to our community. And it also creates, as I said in my previous comment, it creates an on-ramp as well as accountability to do what we said we want to do. I think, many could say that in the community work, we do more talking than we do taking action. And I think that the plan that is set forth here is definitely that action-oriented things that need to take place to continue to move us forward in an equitable manner. And I just want to, again, thank you and your office for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Eddy. I understand and appreciate the conversations we've had, and as well as many other stakeholders. And you're right, it's been an educational process for us to work with the contractors in this case to make sure that they understand what we were doing and how we're doing it and the reasons for the outcome. And I'm happy to report that a majority of those conversations, if not almost 100%, have been very positive. And you can say, well, someone might West Michigan nice you, as I've learned in the last 11 months. Oh, that's great. But I can tell you, we've talked to many of those, and then they're part of those proposals that are right in front of us now, right? The ones that I flashed on the screen, and then there's others that we have in the pipeline that have committed to it as well. And so they've taken action and understood that what the requirements of them of completing the inclusion plan and the commitments they're making. And I also want to be clear is, there's a fine line between how we implement this as it relates to some legal limitations we have in Michigan. But I can tell you there's been strong buy-in, and I think the numbers speak for themselves. And now we just go into the bidding phase and monitoring and lessons learned. And I also want to say that this inclusion plan is an iterative process, right? We're going to learn as each of these projects come through where there are gaps, and then we're going to go address those particular things. If they can't find certain folks or trades or whatever barriers that they show us, then we'll have to go work on that and work with our Office of Equity Engagement and try to increase those numbers to make sure that we can get the right, match the right folks to help move the needle on this inclusion.
Thank you. Member Seeger, do you have a comment?
Yes, and let's hope my internet I conked out for a couple minutes, so I apologize for that. I just want to say that this whole effort is absolutely essential, and I appreciate Mr. Eddy's comment with regard to being the lone voice, but there are many allies on this DDA. So this plan is, and having read this back when it was originally adopted back in the summer, and having seen the update, I just want to assure you that the Grand Rapids Community Foundation and other organizations are ready to stand alongside of this plan. And the city is going to prosper only when we do apply equitable practices throughout the city. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Seeger.
Thank you. I think I would, have to echo those comments. I think in anything we do, having goals, number one, having measurable goals, number two, and at least a sense of accountability or a way of to measure accountability is so important. And I think this helps accomplish that. So looks like it's working so far. So that's great.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would also say, that was a question that many other folks around the community have asked, like, what's the accountability measure, right? And you said, well, we're going to get the numbers and then we're going to ask them to report back, right? And that was an important piece to say, hey, where are we? And if there's gaps, that's okay, but let's walk through that and make sure we understand how we got there, or some things that we can do to help you address it, or program policy changes or other things. But you're absolutely right. So we'll see with these projects where the outcomes come, and make sure that we share those as it relates to the focus areas of our strategic plan.
Great. Any other comments? Well, Jeremiah, thanks for your presentation, and we'd love to have you back reporting accomplishments.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do so, and then we can also use that time to a couple more minutes, so just on the bigger strategic plan that's larger than just this one component of the inclusion plan. So happy to do that, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Jeremiah.
Okay, next is Tim, you're up, the Executive Director report.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I do have a few things to highlight. I know we have some public comments, so I'll try to be brief. Wanted to point out, so both the mayor and I believe you, Mr. Chair, referenced the retail meeting that we had on Friday. We did record that session, and I'll send it out just for the rest of the board's benefit and background. So we had Mike Byrne, who was our consultant, had a full hour with him, and I think some of you were able to attend, but wanted to just give him the space to really talk through in detail some of his findings in his work and really start to look at next steps and recommendations. And so I think you'll recall that a big element of what he was talking about was looking at the kind of co-tenancy and adjacency that's required for a successful retail environment. And so some of the next steps that we'll be talking through and soliciting some of your volunteer time on is identifying zoning implications and any changes that might be needed, talking more about a location and really having a targeted focus on, geographically where we might want to look at a soft goods retail zone. Looking at incubators, so we talked on that a little bit during the Bridge South report out, but thinking more about incubators as well as incentives. So there's a number of next steps that are coming out of that that we'll be sure to keep you posted on. But in the meantime, I'll send out the video, and if you have, I think his presentation is about 30 minutes, and then there's some room for discussion in there. But hopefully, if you weren't able to attend, you can make the time and take a look at that. On that note, wanted to also highlight that we recently released an RFP and put out an announcement for the management of some incubator spaces that we're deploying up in Canal Park. This is sort of the repurposing of some of our outdoor dining huts that we put up in Canal, with the idea that looking at public spaces, park spaces as entrepreneurial opportunities, and so putting that out there to see what sort of response and feedback we get, and expect to have a proposal for that for you in June. Related, the social zones. If you haven't been around downtown recently, those are out and being deployed. We've had to make a couple of minor tweaks based on some feedback from businesses, based on surveys from last year, but the social zones are out and we're moving forward full steam ahead with having those back in play for the spring and summer. A couple of other infrastructure related items. So was happy to participate on Friday in the Ecliptic at Rosa Park's groundbreaking. So the renovation and restoration that you all helped support with some funding is underway. The tentative schedule is to have that wrapped up right around Labor Day weekend, although we're waiting for some clarification on exactly when it'll be delivered. But if you've been near Monroe Center, Rosa, you've seen the fences up and work is underway. So happy to see that happen. Sticking with public space, so the Lion Square project, quick update on that. We have been working with the design team as well as our partners at the state through permitting. We do have to go through a revised EGLE permitting process, which is going to slightly delay the bidding. However, I think given what we've seen both with Ottawa and last month with Rosa, given the bids are coming in high, we are feeling that maybe this slight delay might be a benefit to the overall project. So we think that's about a 3 to 4 month addition to the timeline, but given that we've been working on this now for over a decade, in the big scheme of things, maybe not a huge interruption. Also infrastructure related, we do have 71 new bike racks that were out for installation in the DDA and the TIFA boundary. So you may have seen those going in or around various locations. There will be more on the way, but this was the first delivery for the springtime. So 71 new racks. And then 2 more things to highlight. One is the new mural that was installed at 2 Jefferson, so just south of Fulton there, called Live to Eat, done by artist Maddie Schaefer, was made possible by an Activate This Place grant. Hopefully you've had a chance to see that. It was also on our social media over the past few weeks. And then lastly, also on our social media, wanted to highlight the great work from our team on the Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. We've been doing posts throughout the month to highlight local members of that community and their stories, And Sam Suarez, Max Vanderforest, and Marion Bonneau on our team have really been pulling that all together. So I just wanted to publicly thank them and draw your attention to that if you had not seen it yet on our social media. So those are some of the things that we have going on. Quite a bit of activity as we're moving into the spring, but happy to take any questions or hear any comments as well.
Sounds good. I would just like to add to the, anybody who wasn't able to join the retail session that we just had, I strongly recommend that you look at the recording. It did, I thought it was provocative in changing the way at least I was looking at retail, and maybe others would agree. So yeah. Anything else for Tim? Thank you, Tim. Now we move into board member, public comment. If there's anyone in the public that would like to comment, just a reminder, if you could state your name, you have 3 minutes to speak, and the board will not engage, but as always, we'll take it under advisement. Is there anybody in the public that would like to make a comment?
Yes, Scott Atchison would like to address this board.
Okay, Scott, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'm here to try to tell you that you're thinking all wrong about why we do or do not need an information center downtown. Couple questions. Where can I get breakfast food? You know, what restaurants are still open, still serving breakfast? That's one of the questions the staff in the information center would answer. Another question. Hey, I'm here in town for a wedding. I need to buy a wedding present. Where are the retail outlets downtown? That is another thing that the staff at the information center would answer better than the internet. I think the whole world's going crazy where they think everything's got to be electronic. I don't like talking to robots or virtual assistants. I like the face-to-face interaction with people. But where you're thinking all wrong, everybody thinks an information center is going to be so expensive. And I think you're thinking wrong. The Downtown Development Authority should build a 200-300 square foot structure right at Rosa Parks Circle, right behind the statue of Rosa Parks, for the Convention and Visitors Bureau to operate. And don't charge the Convention and Visitors Bureau rent. Why would you want to charge your Convention and Visitors Bureau rent and drive up the prices when you're trying to do good for downtown? The information center promotes what downtown has to offer. But I'm saying it shouldn't be expensive. You've got enough employees in place between the Convention and Visitors Bureau and the 14 people that work at the Downtown Development Authority. I'm saying maybe the people at the Downtown Development Authority, the DGRI offices, should work the booth to keep the expenses down. We have so much overhead already on the books between the Convention and Visitors Bureau. The city of Grand Rapids has employees. Kent County has employees. Why does everyone think an information center is going to cost so much money? I think you're thinking wrong. You know, and if you think electronic kiosks are the answer, you're wrong. People want human interaction face to face. And right now, with the $2.8 million upgrades to Rosa Parks Circle, I think you guys are thinking all wrong that you don't need an information center. You know, and how many people are working remotely from home? They could work remotely from the information center. You know, the last thing I'm going to say, what's open for retail? That's what the booth would answer. And all the restaurant and bar information. Are the museums open today? Those are the questions. People don't want to look at their cell phone all day to find out what's open. That's all I'm going to say to you. Please change your thinking. Done.
Thank you. Anybody else in the public that would like to make a comment? Man, I don't see any. Is there any others you see?
No, I think that might be it.
Okay. Next is board member discussion. Is there anyone on the board that would like to offer any pearls of wisdom for the rest of us? Jen, are you still on? We haven't heard from you today. Not to put you on the spot, but it'd be nice to hear your voice.
Hi, I am still on. Yeah, what can I add? You know, I was doing some research of what our economists in the construction industry are saying about material price increases. We were in that part of the conversation. So I'll also say that the current thinking is that construction pricing is going to continue to increase in the short term. And really it's upon the global pandemic beginning to, you know, decrease in its impact that's going to help moderate those prices. So, you know, short term, and just anecdotally through what I'm hearing through our general contractor community, the rise of prices is going to continue, yet the phones keep ringing. So as long as that demand continues, you know, those prices are going to continue to increase as well. So from a pricing standpoint, we're probably wise to lock in what we can at this point, because we are going to continue to see those increases.
Appreciate that. No, I am going to put you on the spot. You need to define short term.
Thanks.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
yeah, short term, right.
I know. Next, KM, we haven't heard you all day and I miss your voice completely. Are you still on, KM? Oh, maybe. Oh, okay.
I am on. Here I am. I had computer trouble, so I'm on my phone here and listening, and I'm really fascinated by particularly the equity and inclusion efforts, and we'll look forward to seeing the report back on success with that effort. So thank you for that.
Yeah, agreed. Anybody else like to make a comment? Appreciate everybody's time. Good meeting. And 9:41, we are 4 minutes early, unlike last meeting. So congratulations, Tim.
Kudos to you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I want to spread the love, but hearing none, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Take care. Have a good week.
You too.